Hi, everybody. This is Todd Robinson again with the Quarantine Book Club. And tonight I will be discussing Tapping the Source by Kem Nunn with Jordan Harper. Say hello to the people, Jordan.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
That's Jordan. Jordan is the author of She Rides Shotgun, last year's Edgar Award winner for Best First Novel. And Jordan also has been working on a television show that premiered this week on Showtime. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Jordan?
Sure. It's called Hightown. It's on Stars. The pilot episode's up on Amazon right now. It is the story of a Provincetown, a fish cop, basically. She's somebody who finds lobster fishermen for taking the wrong kind of lobsters out. And she's also a multi-chemical addict, and she discovers a dead body on the beach, which is washed ashore, and it stirs something in her that leads her both on a mystery to try and find out why this girl died, and also it's a journey of self-discovery and sobriety as she kind of works herself out through this case that somehow latches into something and gives her a reason to be sober. And it's a really fun show.
It sounds like a barrel of laughs.
Well, it's a great crime show. It was created by my friend Rebecca Cutter, who I have worked with on multiple shows and is a very good friend of mine. I was a consulting producer on it. I wrote episode 5. Very proud of it. It's a very, very dark episode.
You don't say.
And so, yeah, no, I'm really glad, and I really check it out. I just watched it for the first time last night. I hadn't actually seen any of the finished footage until it came up on Amazon. So I watched it last night. I really like it. So it's good.
Well, I'm very excited to check it out, and I've been someone who's been very aware and a big fan of your work for years. So anytime your name is on something, I'm going to be interested. And the fact that you're saying it's dark comes as no surprise to anyone who has read your work before, either in a short story or in your Edgar Award-winning novel,
She Rides Shotgun?
Yeah, there's some darkness in there, my friend.
There is. The other thing about Hightown that I'll be interested in from your point of view is it does take place in the greater Boston to Provincetown area, and I'm going to need an accent breakdown from you at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And
the accent of New England is very tough because, again, there are so many different accents from even within the state itself. But don't worry, I'll point it out when you guys have messed it up after the fact, when it does nobody any good whatsoever. So the book that we are talking about today is called Tapping the Source by Kem Nunn, which was a 1984 National Book Award nominee, and a book that, until you brought it up to do this about, I had never heard of this book, and I have no idea how. This book is amazing. The word masterpiece doesn't fall off my lips very often, but it really does for this.
No, it is. It's a singular novel. It is, as far as I know, and I've seen it attributed as such, as the creation of the entire concept of surf noir.
Yeah.
It is also, amongst people who know, and I am not one of these people, but I'm told it is the definitive surf novel. It is a literary, work of art. It is also very clearly the inspiration for Point Break, the film, in a way that we'll talk about it.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
No, it's very clearly an inspiration for Point Break, and yet it is a deep novel, and at the same time it's an exciting novel. And not to get to the thesis statement at the beginning, but hey, great place for a thesis statement. A lot of books claim to or talk about transcending the genre, which I think is a garbage way to talk, but this really is a near perfect fusion of literary and genre writing. My personal comparison would be to Winter's Bone by Daniel Woodrell.
Good comparison.
I think it does about the same thing, which is somebody with the literary chops to just write about surfing also decides to attach a compelling mystery and sticks to it. And most people, when they say they transcend the genre, they really mean they can't do the actual work of the genre and just kind of play with some tropes, but in a kind of superficial and pretentious way. And this book doesn't do that, I don't think.
Oh no, there is zero pretension within it. I mean, it is just solid writings. I mean, remarkable character building, remarkable crime fiction in the sense that throughout the book, it gives you nothing but tells you everything.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. And it's equal parts just mystifying, but frustrating in the best way, as any good puzzle when it's being presented to you. And it is presented as a puzzle to you, the reader, as much as it is to the characters.
Very much so. And it's done in a way where Ike, the main character's name is Ike, is never presented as some kind of great detective. And
no.
doesn't
or a tough
really
guy.
Yeah, no, he's just a kid. And if you would like, I could just summarize, the beginning of the novel. And this happens in the first 5 pages of the book. This kid named Ike lives out in the desert with his uncle, and he fixes motorcycles and cars. And he's 19 years old. And one day, a guy shows up at the shop and says, "Hey, I know your sister. She was in Huntington Beach. And now she's not there anymore." And you learn that his sister is sort of a runaway, but an adult runaway, like in her mid-20s. And this guy who just shows up out of the desert, just says, "Hey, I think something happened to your sister." And the guys who did it are Hound Adams and a couple other names. And they're in Huntington Beach. And so Ike, with no tools at his disposal other than a little bit of saved money, goes to Huntington Beach and discovers this culture of surfing and drugs and crime, and looks for his sister. It's a very pure setup. And again, I would relate that back to Winter's Bone again, which is another literary novel with an incredibly clean and pure setup.
Oh yeah, and he walks into this world of Huntington Beach that very, very quickly feels lived in, just not by him. All of these characters have connections and they're not forced. He's just witnessing these things as an outsider. But you have no doubt that this world has been lived in by these characters for years and years and years, based upon their relationships with each other and how they interact or don't interact with each other, many times deliberately.
Yeah.
And but man, the way that he presents to you these characters and who they are, I highlight one specific piece here where he first meets Preston, who's just amazing character, who's sort of a biker type guy who seems to be linked into the world that he's trying to get into and figure out why these 3 men went to Mexico and came with his sister and came back without her. But let me see if I can find it right here. But he describes him as, "It was the kind of face you'd expect to hold a set of eyes like black marbles, dead and mean like a snake's. The kind of eyes that could smoke you on the spot. But the eyes were all wrong somehow, as if they'd lost track of the body they were in." Come on, man. Yeah. That's fantastic. That is just, and you know what that face is.
Yeah.
Well, you and
Kem Nunn he's an amazing writer. And another thing, just to talk about the prose for a second, is, it is a novel from 1984, and it suffers not at all from the current vogue for show don't tell. He's perfectly happy to tell you things all the time.
Oh yeah.
He summarizes. If somebody's angry, if somebody's sad, they look sad. He doesn't try and hide it or feel like he can only give kind of cinematic descriptions of everything, which I think modern crime novels, including my own, tend to do too much of. And we've almost been taught now that kind of writing is cheating, and in fact, it made it, in my opinion, and it's an incredibly fast read.
Yeah. The book moves.
Yeah.
And which is an amazing thing to say, considering there are long stretches where nothing particular happens except for this putting his toes into a world he doesn't understand and is fascinated by. I mean, there aren't a lot of moments moving through it of action and discovery other than his discovery of the world itself as a kid who grew up in the desert. But the prose itself is so good that it just hurdles you through it.
And there are long stretches of descriptions of surfing where A, it's very clear, obviously, that Kem Nunn knows how to surf.
Yeah.
And B, there's a tremendous amount of technical surfing jargon that I don't understand. And I'll tell you this, I don't care that I don't
It didn't
understand.
matter.
It
It
doesn't
felt
matter.
like it made you feel like you understood.
Yes. And I think, again, if somebody is looking to take a writing lesson from this, um, just the use of jargon and also, by the way, mixed in with the absolute poetry that he uses to describe surfing
Yeah.
and the feelings of the idea of tapping the source. Um, and it all melds together that it's fascinating. And I think there's a lot of writers who would have just tried to write a book about a kid learning to surf.
Yeah.
And that novel would have been beautiful, but it would not have been as compelling as this one.
And not only that, but the way that he talks about the love of the beach that Ike is discovering for himself clearly comes from a place within Kem himself. And since this is the quarantine book club, I got to tell you, man, those descriptions were nearly pornographic to me at this point. I'm stuck inside a New York City apartment now for 10 weeks reading about the beach. I just kept scrolling through going, oh, tell me again how the sand felt on your feet.
It's also
it is almost cruel to read this book during a pandemic quarantine.
it's also it's a coming of age novel that is really without without romanticizing it. It's a very dirty journey that Ike goes on, but at the same time, there's just this beauty of this world where anything is possible. Where this 19-year-old kid is just, I'm just going to learn how to surf, and
Yeah.
like as we get older and you start to go, I don't know if I could learn how to surf now. I don't know if that's an option. um and but there's just this yawning possibility of the that this kid has, and not to give anything away, but you really feel that at the end of the novel as well, even though he's a changed and darker person, that he is, kind of has the world in front of him in a way that it because
Yeah,
I
there's
think
a
a lot of
lovely arc to that
yeah.
within that coming of age.
But this is another way that this novel is known. Like I said, it's known very well, I think, amongst particularly California crime writers. This is one of the great California crime novels that isn't written by one of the luminaries of the genre. The other way it's known as is a famously unadaptable book. This is a book that many people have tried to turn into movies, and I think there's somebody trying right now, or maybe somebody has a TV series, and maybe it will work. And again, clearly, Point Break ripped it off very heavily. But there's a reason why in this iteration with Ike as the main character, why it would be hard as a movie, because in a lot of ways, and a lot of novels do this, the Great Gatsby does it, is the main character is not the prime mover of the story. And there's another version of this book where Preston is the hero. Um, I'm using hero loosely, obviously, but
Yeah.
because, like you said, what we have in Ike is one of those classic novel characters who is an observer who exists so that the audience doesn't know what's going on. Again, like Nick and the Great Gatsby, where if you were in Jay Gatsby's head, it's a totally different novel, and it's not as good a one because there's no mystery. The Secret History by Donna Tartt is another novel that is famously, people have tried to adapt it, but it doesn't work because the lead character, whose name escapes me right now, is again one of these kind of vaguely passive characters that works great in a novel to watch more interesting people do things. But
Yeah. I didn't think of it that way, but I can see that.
it's just something I've noticed for a long time, because it's there are these famously difficult to adapt novels, and one thing I've unlocked as somebody who does both is that presence of that character, that Ike, he, as you said, a lot of this is spent with him sitting around looking at people and thinking.
Yeah.
And he is brought along, unlike Johnny Utah in Point Break. But let's just go ahead and let's have this conversation now, because I want to hear why you think it isn't, like, why Point Break isn't a very deep ripoff.
I'm not saying it's not a ripoff, but saying inspiration as the source material. But we're going to one second, going back to the unadaptable, because Kem Nunn has worked in television. He wrote for the last season of Deadwood. He co-created John from Cincinnati, and it's interesting that somehow maybe he hasn't been able to crack his own screenplay version of this book, or if he has, that it's just no one is willing to produce it.
Well,
I am not, other than the fact that there's surfing, going to Point Break now, because it says on the page descriptive of this book, it says inspired the film Point Break. Now, I don't hate the movie Point Break. I don't love it. I know some people fetishize that movie as a great piece of American fun action schlock.
I am one of those people, by the way.
Oh, I know you are.
Yeah.
I know. As much as we agree on many things literary, cinematically, you and I can't have a lot of conversations without getting angry with one another. This goes back a while. I feel like it's almost insulting to the book to say that it's Point Break, other than the fact that they both have surfing. That's like saying Hogan's Heroes, inspired by Elie Wiesel's Night.
Yeah, no.
I was insulted on behalf of the book. And not that there's anything wrong with Point Break, other than all of the things that are wrong with it. What is your take on that? How are you seeing it differently?
Well, here, I'll tell you, first of all, as somebody who loves Point Break, Kem Nunn should probably be very angry about it, because it's nothing like, artistically, it's not the same thing at all. Point Break is, to me, one of the perfect popcorn movies. And it has one very good performance in it that elevates it. But here's the thing. Somebody arrives on the beach undercover and learns how to surf in order to come in contact with shady characters who are led by a guru-like figure who is both seductive and full of shit, and is ultimately revealed to be evil. But it's almost, the difference is what the film does is, instead of having this passive 19-year-old kid, which is the genius of the novel, they make him an FBI agent and make what he's doing much more purposeful. But it is, I mean, and I'll tell you this, when Johnny Utah goes to the surf shop to buy his first surfboard, the 14-year-old kid who sells it to him says, you should get into this. Surfing's the source.
Ah. Yeah. See, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie.
It has not been a long time for me. So
that doesn't surprise me in the least. We enjoy what we enjoy, Jordan.
I don't even believe in the phrase guilty pleasures.
I don't either. I mean, you're talking to a guy who has more Godzilla movies than any grown man should. Well, again, we're not going to get into our
No. We don't need to start talking about Mandy.
Opinion on film
here all night. Yeah.
But as I said, I'm very, very happy that you brought this book, into my radar, because I would have never come across this on my own. And I'm just shocked that it's not treated with a more elevated status, even amongst the crime writing community, as, say, James Crumley, as, say, Elmore Leonard. I mean, this is as good as it gets. But
I agree.
For you, Jordan, is why specifically did you choose this book?
Well, I think a couple of reasons, one of which is exactly what you said. I feel like I treat this book and I think of this book as being on that level with the very best of crime fiction. And it has, I think 15 years ago, it had a reputation, and now it is faded a little bit. I don't think Kem Nunn writes a lot of novels right now. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize. He has written other novels that are very good. I haven't read all of them. He has another one called Tijuana Straits. It's a very good book. Not quite as good as this, but very good. And I, as a adopted California crime writer, but now somebody who thinks of himself as a California crime writer, like I said, this is a foundational book. And as much as there is a canon of crime fiction, it needs to be on that shelf. And I don't know if, again, it suffers from that thing that what we're talking about here, the difficult fate of a book that is both a genre book and a literary book. Is it, too literary for the mystery crowd and too mystery for the literary crowd? I don't
honestly. I think what might be hurting it is the comparison to Point Break, because love or hate Point Break, I think if you're looking at it and you're expecting Point Break, it's not going to be what you want. It's not a popcorn book. If you're someone who wants something outside of that, it's going to disappoint you in that sense. And I think if you're someone who is looking for something that is as good and as literary as this, and you see Point Break, you're not going to go for this book. Because like you mentioned, Daniel Woodrell earlier, that book has been put on that shelf.
Yeah.
And they share very much that same aesthetic.
Yeah, I know, and I think that makes sense. And I have to say, again, as somebody who loves the movie Point Break, if you said, "Hey, this is the novelization of Point Break," or "This is," yeah, if that's all that you're selling it as, you're right. That's not a compliment, and
It's a disservice to the book.
it really is. And
I'm
you're
not
right
someone
about
who
that.
hates Point Break. I'm just not someone who has the affinity for it that you have.
But again, as someone who has affinity for it, I am sure that, like, were I to meet Kem Nunn, I would not say, "Man, Point Break." Huh?
Boy, thank you for Point Break, sir. What
And
brought it into your radar?
that's a great question. It's been there for a while, and it's been there. I read this book, well over a decade ago. I'm not exactly sure when it came across. Like I said, it is a book, or at least it used to be a book that would pop up on lists of, like, great California crime novels, great California novels, frankly.
Yeah.
And I know that I read it before John from Cincinnati came out, because I remember seeing the press release saying that David Milch of Deadwood and Kem Nunn from Tapping the Source were doing a surf television show together. And I was so excited to watch that show.
I would be too if I had that prior knowledge of this book.
Yeah, and then, look, John from Cincinnati is obviously just a completely other thing. And it's not that thing that I was really, really hoping for. Instead, you kind of got both of them at their most literary slash artsy, and it didn't have any of the grit of either of what they do really well. And so, I was disappointed by that. But before it came out, I was over the moon. I was like, well, great, my new favorite TV show is about to come out.
Yeah.
So by then, I already had a really deep respect for Kem Nunn. And so I don't really know. Like I said, I've read a few of his other books, but I definitely came to him through this. And the other time that I have seen it mentioned is on the TV show Entourage. And I don't think this is where I learned about it. And I really hope it's not. I think I learned about it, like I
I
said,
really hope it is. I'm going to do this in a second. Please go on.
because I think
Wow.
it is at one point Vinny Chase is asked, like, what his dream project is, and he says it's to turn Tapping the Source into a movie. Um,
Huh.
so, like I said, I mean, I think you're right in that it is not Point Break the novel, but I do think, much like I would say about Winter's Bone, there's some deliberateness to the language that might be difficult for a certain brand of pop reader, but
Yes.
not really. I mean,
No. Yes and no.
yeah, only the most, like, if you're not willing to put in an ounce of sweat, then
Yeah.
stay away. If you just,
I
if
mean,
you
it's not
got,
like trying to read Cormac McCarthy.
no, not at all. Like I said, I think it really hits that middle ground so well,
Yeah.
and that
Solidly.
solidly. And all of my favorite literary books, that's the realm that I like. That's what I aspire to. But it's also all of
And
my
if I
favorite.
may be so bold, that's an area that you also excel in. As I read the book, I definitely felt its influence on how you stylize your prose and do it just as well.
Oh, thank you very much. No, I
Oh,
appreciate
you know
that.
I'm a fan, Jordan. Come on,
I
kid.
know. But I have a phrase that I use a lot, more in, like, the Hollywood writers' rooms. But it's "Por qué no las dos?" or "Why not
Ah,
both?"
bueno.
And which is an old internet meme of from a Mexican cartoon, where it's like, should we have hot sauce or cheese sauce? And this little 4-year-old girl goes, "Por qué no las dos?" And then you find out they're selling, like, cheesy hot sauce, right?
Yes, I
Um,
remember that ad.
but I use it a lot because, to me, it's a question I always want to ask: is, why is this action scene not a character scene? Why is this character scene not moving the plot forward? Like, why can't you do both? And I know, like, we've had this conversation that the, not to get all left wing, but, like, the capitalist model of sales sometimes wants to put things in categories of literary or genre, because that's good for moving units maybe a little better. But shouldn't all good art try and be entertaining? And shouldn't all entertaining things try and have quality to them? Like, it just seems to me like a no-brainer. And
No,
it's
because this is America, Jordan. This is America. You need to be able to describe it in maybe 3 words. 3 words and you're pushing it. Otherwise, the marketing department's going to kick you out.
And you want to talk about why we don't know Kem Nunn better. It's probably maybe here's why it's Point Break's fault, because Point Break got made, and I'm sure that made it a lot harder to make Tapping the Source the movie. And if
Yeah,
there,
but after all of the points that you made, absolutely, that's exactly why it would make Tapping the Source a more difficult or more palatable project for a studio to pick up.
yeah, and like, I knew about Winter's Bone before the movie, like, you did, but like,
Yeah,
I think that movie helped even more so, not immediately, but like years from now, that having a movie, sadly, kind of this type of book specifically, this kind of literary slash genre thing that maybe has a hard time finding a marketing hook. Oftentimes, the books like that survive, and again, I would, as I often do in conversations, bring up Elroy and L.A. Confidential. We don't know how well the world would know who James Elroy is without the movie L.A. Confidential.
yeah.
And there are exceptions to that, but I do think this kind of novel in particular kind of begs for the world to find out about it through a movie, because I think it isn't always perfectly served by how we market and distribute books today. But what do I know about marketing and distributing books?
I don't know. Clearly, I don't either. This is the best I'm doing right now, dude.
No, exactly. But it's like I said, I really, if anybody listening hasn't read it and we haven't talked you into it, I really should read Tapping the Source. Todd, you should read Tijuana Straits.
I'll put it on my list. I'm already a fan just after this book.
And I've read
it really blew me away.
I
also love, and this was the Jordan moment for me too in reading this book. And without spoiling anything within the novel, at one point it just out of left field takes a really 1984 action movie turn. And I just was kind of blown. I was like, wait, what? Wait. And I went back 2 pages and I'm like, let me start reading this chapter again very slowly. And it worked within the framework of the novel that it had presented beforehand, even though it was tires squealing on concrete turn onto the highway.
Yeah.
It's like, but it was fantastic. And that was, I was thinking that might be one of the things you said about why this novel was the one you picked, because of that, honestly, little batshit turn it made.
It does make a batshit turn at one point.
Yeah. Well, we can curse, by the way.
Oh, good. I just did.
Yeah. That's why I led with that. Dude,
I'm glad. I meant to ask you that beforehand.
There was going to be curses every now and then.
It's good to keep it vaguely clean as opposed to how I normally talk.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I am showing remarkable restraint. If you've known me for more than 10 minutes, this is as Disney Channel as I get.
But no, when you first proposed this to me, I really didn't think about any other books. It took me maybe 2 minutes of just like, oh, what would be good, and trying to find something that was this good but also hadn't been taught to death. I think if we did like The Grifters, which to me is the first crime novel I think I ever read. I thought about that. I was like, people know The Grifters. If you don't know The Grifters, go read The Grifters. But like, or obviously, as somebody who adapted James Elroy in a failed pilot, I talked about
not
James.
Failed. The pilot was wonderful.
Thank you.
You were failed by the television industry, Jordan.
But and as somebody whose dog is named Elroy, I love James Elroy, but you and I don't need to discuss Elroy. And so I think that this novel is, obviously, look, it was a National Book Award finalist. It wasn't totally unsung. It's still in print, 35 years later. So, it's not completely buried, but I don't think it has the reputation it deserves. And if we can start talking about it again, then I think that's a great thing.
Then we've done our job, and that's exactly the purpose of why we're doing this kind of thing and having these kind of conversations.
Great.
So I'm going to wrap it up here, my friend.
Always a pleasure, man.
Thank you for having this conversation. Thank you for bringing this book to me, man. I had a blast with it.
Yeah,
So
you're
if
welcome.
anyone out there is interested in purchasing either Jordan's Edgar Award-winning novel or this amazing novel or the two ridiculous things that I've managed to write so far,
which are great and funny and awesome, and people should absolutely read.
It's a thing. Just go down below what you're looking at right here, and there should be a bunch of links for all of our stuff. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Jordan. We'll talk again soon.
If I had known that we were going to be showing this, I wouldn't have touched my face so much, everybody.
Oh, I do it all the time. You're not playing with my beard. I'm doing my thing. We're inside. We're socially distanced.
I would have changed. All right.